bring in Texas Republican Congressman Michael McCaul. He's ranking member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. You were invited along on the trip with Nancy Pelosi. You declined. Why?
Well, you know, we haven't seen our families in a long time, and I have family obligations, so family first. However, I fully support her going to Taiwan, as I would any member of Congress. Speaker Gingrich traveled. He's the last speaker to have traveled in 1997. And I think it's very important from a political deterrence value that she go. And I've talked to her about that trip. The question is whether she's going to get an airplane or whether the president will tell the military to deny that airplane. The Biden administration is going to kowtow to President Xi and deny the Speaker of the House, whoever she is, to visit Taiwan to provide political deterrence. We all know that she is President Xi is looking at Taiwan in a potential invasion. This is one of the few instances where I actually agree with her.
So there's all this saber rattling, Congressman, that's going on between China and the United States over this trip. President Xi, in this 2-hour phone call that he had yesterday with President Biden, saying, quote, "Those who play with fire will be perished by it. It is hoped that the U.S. will be clear-eyed about this." Mark Esper, the former Secretary of Defense in the Washington Post, saying that we can't allow China to dictate who travels where and when, saying we should not take all these declarations and proclamations from Beijing too seriously. If we allow Beijing to start dictating who can or cannot travel, then where does that end? Why are we not hearing that from President Biden?
That's right. Those who play with fire will perish by it. That's what President Xi said. If President Biden denies the Speaker of the House of all people, denies the trip to Taiwan, what message does that send to President Xi? It's once again projecting weakness to our adversaries. What does that say to Xi? What did it say to Putin, right? When he did the Nord Stream 2, he invades Ukraine. Xi's going to see it as weakness. It lays a predicate for invading Taiwan. I think this is a trip that needs to go forward. And I think it would be extraordinary for President of the United States to defy a Speaker of the House to travel to Taiwan and it's a sign of support for that country.
Congressman, this is the latest tweet out of Chinese state media, the latest development in this story, in that it posted a tweet with this threat. If U.S. fighter jets escort Pelosi's plane into Taiwan, it is invasion. The PLA, the Army, has the right to forcibly dispel Pelosi's plane and the U.S. fighter jets, including firing warning shots and making tactical movement of obstruction. If ineffective, then shoot them down. What's your response to that? And how should we respond to it?
Well, they've been very provocative. And I think the problem is if the Biden administration backs down against weakness. They've been very provocative lately. They intercepted an American plane in international space, a Australian and Canadian plane. The Australian plane, they actually clipped the wings and threw aluminum into the jet engines. I predict if this trip goes forward to Taiwan, they will do something very provocative. But President Xi is probably smart enough not to shoot down an aircraft with the Speaker of the House on it. He's not going to like it, but I don't think he's going to go to that extreme. And so I think this trip should go forward and send a strong message to President Xi that the American people, whether you're Republican or Democrat, are against your invasion of Taiwan.
Let's hope that President Xi is smarter than that, Congressman. We had General Keith Kellogg on just a little while ago. He believes that within the next 2 years, China is going to make a play for Taiwan. President Biden sort of erased the long-held policy of strategic ambiguity, saying that the United States would come to the defense of Taiwan. But China's military is growing at such a breakneck pace that many analysts believe that a U.S. victory in a confrontation with China is not necessarily assured.
No, it's not at all. And what I worry about is the, if you look at the map, they are circling the island right now. They're being very military provocative. I think as long as Biden is in office, then they see the weakness projected, that is their timetable to invade, just like Putin invading Ukraine. And they're looking at Ukraine very closely. Would they prefer to do it like Hong Kong without a shot fired or Solomon Islands without a shot? Of course, right? Or maybe the president size up for, she can't run again in 2 years. Maybe they want to do it by overthrowing an election or by disinformation. But plan B is a military invasion. and it's going to happen under President Biden's watch.
All right, Michael McCaul, thank you very much for joining us, Congressman. Appreciate your time today. Thank you.
That is not a comforting prediction. Thank you for that.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Kilmeade. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to click to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page. This is the only way that I know for sure that you're not going to miss any great commentary, any great news bites, any great interviews coming your way on Fox. You can get it all here on YouTube. So subscribe right now.